You're listening to the 95 podcast from the team at 95 Network, where we host conversations specifically designed to support leaders in small and mid-sized churches.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the 95 podcast. This is Dale Sellers, and this is the first podcast of 2026. I never dreamed I'd say that when I was in high school in 1980, but here we sit, and we're actually recording in November of 25. I've got three experts with me today as we begin the new year because we want to help you set the course for the new year and talk through some stuff. But man, we hope you guys are ready for a great new year. Looking forward to ministry. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is how we can come along beside you and encourage you where you may be struggling, and also just really rejoice with you and party with you about what you're doing that's working. But before we get into all that, let me introduce my guest today. I've got Jason Allison with me. Many of you know Jason. He's been on multiple podcasts. He's part of the 95 Network team. Jason, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, Dale.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. Jason also works with Converge Mid-Atlantic, and the person who actually runs it, even though Brian thinks he does, the person who runs Converge Mid-Atlantic, Emily Manders, is with us. And Emily, how are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
Well, I like talking to experts, and you're definitely one of those. And then I have Michael Schooley. Michael's a dear friend. We connected a couple of years ago. He hosted one of our conferences in northwestern New York, and we were recently on a podcast together that he was hosting, or a coaching call he was hosting. He's been on the podcast as well. Michael, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you. What I want to do is just quickly, it's just to introduce you guys a little bit better to everybody. Kind of give us just a little bit a take of what you're doing right now, Jason, and then I'll do that with Emily and Michael. So, kind of what's happening with Jason right now.
Well, I am full-time with Converge Mid-Atlantic as the director of church strengthening. So my job is to help our 100 plus churches up and down the East Coast and inland a little bit as they try to make sure we have healthy pastors and healthy churches.
Take a moment and tell us what Converge is for those who may not have heard of Converge.
Sure. Yeah. Converge, it's a national network of, churches that are affiliated because they have some like-minded ideas. It's almost 170 years old as it's Baptist in its polity, so it's not really a denomination, but it kind of is. So it's really confusing.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is it grew out of the Swedish Baptist roots, and so now we've got almost 2,000 churches all over the country, and then international missions all over the world.
Cool, man. Emily, what do you do specifically with Converge and then beyond? Because I think you also serve in a church.
Yes, I do. I'm director of operations at Converge Mid-Atlantic, and I get to support guiding the growth of our organization and our team, which is just a joy. It's fun to work with Jason every day. So, and the rest of the team too. They're all really great people who love God's kingdom and his work that he's doing in the Mid-Atlantic. I also co-planted with my husband Restoration Church in Levittown, PA. So I am the executive director there as well. And we're in the busy season of which we will be out of by the time people hear this, but the holidays and really a lot of community outreach that we do right now. So
you're in Pennsylvania, Jason, you're in Ohio, and then Michael?
So I also planted a church 19 years ago, just stepped away, handed off the baton in a beautiful way to one of the youth pastor of the church who was there for a while. Now I'm also with Converge Northeast, started in September. I'm working with church planters and churches who want to plant, and also developing leaders through residencies, internships, really just through any kind of pathway to help leaders develop and then send them to what God's called them to. And I also work with Northeast Collaborative on my second part of that, and work, again, a lot of that's care for soul pastors, soul care and multiplication and strengthening of churches.
Yeah, you and I recently were on a call you hosted with some of your pastors, and it was just, I thought it was really cool because we just basically, I think we had 5 pastors on, and we just spent about an hour, a little bit more together, just talking, and basically we just went through a couple of things, which is something we're trying to do here at 95 Network. We asked them, hey, man, what are you guys doing that's working? And then where are you struggling? And yeah, I just thought it led to a really good conversation. Before we dive into which is along those lines of what I want to talk about today, Jason, you just had an experience this past Sunday. As I said, we're recording this in mid-November, but I feel like this is worth talking about as a lead in to where we're going today. Kind of share with everybody what you just went through.
Yeah, well, I went down to Lexington, Kentucky, where I grew up, and the church where I was baptized, it actually closed its doors. It had its final service this past week. It was 110 years old, and I think it had only had 5 pastors in that entire time. And the one that baptized me in 1978, so many, many years ago. He died in 2020, just before he was still, the pastor, and he died right before the pandemic hit. And they tried to keep things going through the pandemic, but honestly, they just were down to about 14 or 15 people, and just couldn't maintain things the way they needed to be maintained. And so they made the decision to shut the doors. But it was a Church of Christ, non-instrumental Church of Christ, meaning they didn't have any instruments or anything in the worship. And so it was interesting, and to go back and to see. Honestly, the building, I think they still had the same paneling that they had when I was baptized in
The
the late
picture you
70s.
sent me, it looked like it did.
Yeah. And yet, there is some dedicated people and families literally the last pastor was was related to one of the first pastors, and so like it had been a large family, but families had been connected. But they one thing I noticed, they talked a ton about the preacher, and they celebrated the preachers. But there honestly was very little talk about disciple making. And for me, that was, one of those things that I'm noticing churches that are all about the preacher. They're the ones that are not really growing, and they're the ones that are struggling to maintain things, because as the preacher gets older, or it's time for him to move on or whatever, there's no one left. Once he's gone, everything just kind of falls apart. And that's one thing I noticed about this church, just as they were recounting the history. It was very preacher centered in the way it was formed. And it was never more than probably maybe a couple hundred at some point. So it's not like it was this massive church. But yeah, it was interesting to go see. And I talked to a couple other of my friends who were there, who we were there at the same time, about the same age. And we all noted that the baptistry was not heated. And we all thought it was frigid, or we were being filled with the Holy Spirit. We weren't sure which it was.
Knowing you, it was because it was cold. Because you and I were texting back and forth, because you said it was like a 3-hour service.
It was.
They wanted to cover everything that happened in 110 years. But I just kept thinking, what if I wonder if the church that I grew up in, that I was baptized in, back in the 70s, they're really on the same trajectory. And when you made the statement about it was all about the preacher, I got to thinking, if you go to that church right now, they on the wall right behind the auditorium is a photo of all the preachers. Now we had dozens over the years, because whatever reason, but it's just like, there's so many churches, this is what it's about, and there's so many pastors listening right now who think this is what it's all about.
Yeah.
I think one of the things about Christian education, I'm not anti-education, but I think what we've done is we've created preachers, but we haven't created pastors, disciplers, leaders. They aren't able to do what Michael's just done. In fact, Michael, we need to do a separate podcast about your handoff, because, this is one of the things that's freaking me out. I'll just say it like that, about where we are in the church today is succession. And as I have mentioned multiple times on recent podcasts, I recently saw what Carrie Newhoff had a guest on, who told us that in the next 10 years, 160,000 churches where their pastor will transition away and someone will come in. And I'm like, that scares me when I think about the future of the church in America, because I don't know if we have that many people in the pipeline. And so, at 95 Network, one of our big focuses is that we want you to be healthy. Yes, we want you to grow numerically. I always say that we live in the residue of the seeker and attractional movements. And so those were specifically about numbers and budgets. But we didn't focus on building people that much. And I think before a pastor is going to build people, before a church is going to become a discipleship church, it's going to have to become a pastor who understands how to take care of themselves. And so it's along those lines. I wanted to kind of talk about some things today. Michael, when you and I were on, can you kind of walk through what that cohort, that training group, what it is you call it, how that came about, and what y'all do, and how often you meet and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we call it processing time. It's supposed to be very relational. We try to value the pastor's time. We do it for an hour. We cut it off at an hour. We've been doing it for a few years. Before I even started leading it, Dan Nichols led it. But the idea is to get pastors in a Zoom room, cover maybe something that might have value to their ministry, to them personally. We've talked about soul care, to like first impressions, to leadership development, discipleship, multiplication. But I think the power of the room, or the why it's so important, is it's partly creating a brotherhood. Like, hey, here's other pastors who are doing the same thing you are, and you're also learning from each other. It's not just content driven; it is relationship driven, and knowing that we're on mission together.
Yeah, Jason, you kind of lead some things like that as well too. Kind of walk me through what you do.
Yeah, we've got a few different kinds of like cohorts or circles of learning, whatever you want to call it, and
I
they
like
vary.
circles of learning better than cohort.
There
I
you
don't know
go.
why I don't like the word cohort. It's just
Dale, you've probably got something in your past we need to dig up and deal
I
with.
went to a cohort just messing with me.
No, we've done several, and we're looking to start several more. In the past, I've created a cohort for executive pastors in our network, and we just met once a month, and it was very similar to what Michael was saying. It was some shared learning, but it was also just relationship building. But the consistency of once a month meeting up on Zoom and just seeing each other, and then every so often when we happen to be in the same area to touch base in person, that was just it was just encouraging to them, and it sharpened the blade just a little bit too, in learning some stuff. We've done that. We're in the middle of trying to start a next gen ministries cohort. We just did a webinar type thing last week, and we're going to try to build on that so that our next gen leaders from across the region can have some just relational connections with other churches who are doing similar things, or at least trying to, and sharing best practices and things like that. And actually, you talked about succession planning. Another form of cohort is one that we're looking to start the first of the year. It's actually in partnership with Chemistry Staffing. We're going to do a succession planning cohort.
Good.
And it's going to be 6 sessions with the pastor, 4 sessions with the lead elder, board president, whatever their leader is there, and then 1 with all of them together. And the goal, like, we actually have a very clear goal. This one's more of a teaching and training cohort, because the goal by the end is that you will have a document that has your emergency plan, the hit by a bus plan, right?
Yep.
And also has your succession plan, even though it might be rough, right? Because it's not necessarily, we don't have names or anything to fill in necessarily.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be the type thing where when the time comes, and with the emotions when they're high and all the things, you've already got it planned out. Right. And so that's kind of the idea for us with cohorts is we try to see what kind of cohort do we need. Is it a relationship building one? Is it an ongoing one? Is it a time, related one that's going to be a 6-week or so, whatever it is?
Mm-hmm.
And is there an objective at the end of it? And we try to make it really clear which one. And then Emily and I actually have a cohort type thing that we do around a Clarity House product that we are licensed to use called Handcrafted Calling. And so she and I have had just a ton of fun leading a group through that. And that was also one of those very focused cohorts.
Well, when I reached out to you and told you I wanted to do this podcast, and I already knew I wanted to connect with Michael, you said, "Hey, man," because I asked, who do you know that's an expert in this?" And you said Emily. So, Emily, we're leaning on you now. Tell us a little bit about your involvement with this cohort coaching kind of thing that you're doing.
Well, it was great to do that with Jason. Personally, too, I was going to say, I know I heard about the brotherhood that can happen, but there's great sisterhood stuff that happens as well. And for me, as a woman in leadership, one of the best ones I was a part of, shout out to Jenny Catron and Women in Leadership. I did a 6-month cohort with her organization, got connected with leaders all over the nation that are in similar seats to I am, and really helped me unlock some things in my leadership through that process. I know Converge also partners with Alongside Ministry Wives. They offer ongoing cohorts for anyone, any woman in ministry, but especially if you're a spouse in ministry too. There's just a lot out there, I think, for women. If you feel isolated and like you don't have that partner to grab and go learn with, you can absolutely find them in online spaces. So just shout out for lots of great places to go learn and make friends in ministry that can help bring you to the
Well,
next level.
you mentioned, did you say there's something for pastors' wives? Did I hear you say that in passing?
Alongside Ministry Wives, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that comes out of Colorado. We have a bunch of Converge coaches around the nation that are actually part of that group. So, and there's different topics that they go for. So those are more like short-term learning groups, maybe 6 weeks, I think, or a couple
Mhm.
months at a time. And I think they launch them again soon. Actually, that comes out, and they'll start in like January and beyond. So
That's
check
a
out the
huge,
website.
huge,
Yeah,
huge need. Yeah, and
yeah,
we can get the website and stuff and put it in the
yeah,
show notes. We've tried our best over the years to try to provide some support for specifically for pastors' wives. I know we have female leaders as well in ministry, but
yes,
specifically for pastors' wives because um, they're a lot of them are not doing well. And so it's
yes.
really encouraging to hear that you are a part of that and you have that going. Hey, Michael, what's been some of the wins you've seen as far as you've been part of these cohorts?
Again, there's different shapes as you
Let me
heard
ask you this.
here.
So were
Yeah.
you part of one before you were leading one?
I've been in different shapes and forms of different
Okay. All right.
cohorts. And here's what I think is why we do them. One is I think we live in a very content driven world. There's plenty of content out there. But how do you process through all this content is a big part of that. And I think these cohorts or small groups, whatever you want to call them, give you an opportunity for a leader, pastor's wife, anyone really, to process through some form of content that'll be beneficial to their ministry so they can really contextualize it. And a
Yeah.
lot of times I think you're using some of the best, you talk about best practices. And I think it's sometimes you're learning from practitioners too, which helps people who are living a certain story or walking through different pieces of their ministry, and to hear how they contextualize a certain content then helps you figure out, all right, in the community I'm in the church I'm in, how do I use this so that we become a healthy ministry? And so, and I also think there's, what do they say, unintended consequences in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
That as we are walking through a cohort, not only are you learning, but I think the relationships become something that, and depending on what the length of the cohort and how that all plays out, but those, especially soul care, like if you're sharing some deep things with people, it has a way of bonding you together.
Yeah.
Or later on, even if you're doing like a campus and you're learning about campus ministry, how to start a campus, now you have someone who's doing it 6 months before you and like, hey, can I call you and can I walk this with you? So there's all these unintended consequences of a cohort that all are through peer-to-peer connections, probably with a guide helping them through like, okay, how do we navigate these questions and all that. But that's the beauty. I think the peer-to-peer learning is really a beautiful thing of these cohorts.
Because I'm the old man here, you're addressing an issue that was a huge problem for us in my earlier days of ministry when I was pastoring my church. We had lots of experts writing lots of books about things they'd never done. And so here, and even in Jason and I do a lot of consulting and we do vision days with small churches. They're so leery of quote unquote the experts coming in and telling them stuff that they've never done before. In the small church space specifically, where we focus our attention, you have people coming in to do consulting with churches who've never served in a church. Or they never worked in a small church. If you haven't worked in a small church, it's different. It's just different, And so you need that kind of support. And when you can find it from someone who's seasoned, And honestly, I get to do what I do at 95 Network, and I always tell everybody, the only reason I get to do this is because I just didn't quit. I've been in ministry for 40, it's by now about 45 years. And the main reason I get to do this is because I just didn't quit. And I had many, many, many opportunities. In fact, what we're doing here is we're trying to talk about the value of connecting through technology. Obviously in person is great, but we're just seeing more and more of success in this arena. Jason, that's kind of how you and I connected from the very beginning. Kind of share that story a little bit for those who haven't
Yeah.
heard it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the cliff notes of it is back in 2018-ish. The church that I had planted back in 2006 was really struggling because we had some leadership things happen and whatever. But I had reached a point where I was ready to quit. I was ready to be done, with that. And through Unstuck Group, and then in partnership with 95 Network, got a grant to get some coaching, and for some reason they stuck me with this guy named Dale Sellers, and so and obviously you live down in South Carolina, I live in Columbus, Ohio, so it's not like we were going to meet up for coffee weekly, but because we could do things through Zoom and we could chat, it was beneficial to me, and in the process, you and I did form a relationship, even though we hadn't met in person for the first year, really, because of we just didn't live close to each other, and so, but there was still that ability to connect with someone in that whole process.
And I will say that when we did finally meet in person, that day is still so big in my heart because you introduced me to Raising Cane's Chicken. And so I had an event in southern below Columbus, and you and I met together, and we and I was introduced to it. And again, you said I'm from South Carolina. We love chicken, so
That's right.
I remember that was just this powerful bonding moment.
Yeah.
And from all kidding aside, Jason's one of my dearest friends, and we met through an online coaching experience, and it was a year before we actually met in person.
Yeah.
And now you're part of our team. And when I met you, you were not healthy. I was concerned for you. And now to see you leading and doing what you're doing, it's just really super cool. Here's what I want to do. I'll take a short break. We come back. I want to talk about the reason that we are seeing this shift happening toward the value of this. So we'll take a short break. We'll be right back with our team of experts. Back with our team of experts now, talking through just some of the things we've learned about connecting with people online. The reason I wanted to have this conversation with you guys is, 95 Network has done dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of conferences. And for whatever reason, that's not happening very much right now. If we have a conference plan, oftentimes we can't get enough people to come to even make it happen. And again, we're talking about a half-day conference. Compassion International sponsors our conference, so it only costs $25 to come. And we provide you a great lunch. But as I've begun to talk about this with other groups, even the Unstuck group, my friends there, folks at Compassion, other networks that do what we're doing, everybody's seeing the same thing. I think exponential would be the outlier to this, but as a general rule, conferences and in-person gatherings have just not been very well attended over the last few years. Have you seen that, Emily, as far as with what you guys do with Converge?
Yes, and people don't decide to come until about 2 weeks before. And usually it's because of their relational connection, that it's a family reunion versus like the content. I don't know that they come for the content anymore because I think Michael said it. We're all overwhelmed by content. So if we let them know we're having intentional places for processing the content, that I think does help them want to be there more, that they know it's a workshop, that they're going to work through things and not just sit and take in, because people don't have as much mental space for that right now, I don't think.
Even with the exponential, and I'm not saying this is true, but what I have heard many people say is they don't really go there to gain they do exactly what you just said. They just go there to catch up with people. And I'm like,
yeah,
well,
they want to be with their friends.
Yeah, which is weird to me because we can't get people to come in person, but then when they go there, that's what they want to be there for. Jason, help me figure this out.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is the relationships. I mean, Emily kind of hit it on the head there. It's the relationships that are already in place that then when you have an excuse to all come together, that's the only reason you're really going. I mean, I was at a conference just a couple weeks ago, and it's this big one, and it's, big names, and I ended up not even registering for the conference. I went for the pre-conference stuff that I had to be at, and then I hung around long enough to reconnect with a lot of the people that I only get to see, at places like this, where we're all in one place, and then I went home. Like, I didn't stick around for the content, because it was all about the relationships.
Yep.
And I feel like I think that's the key thing people are longing for, especially people in ministry, people, especially lead pastors, and because it gets very lonely. And when you can actually connect with other people who understand, maybe they're not in the same situation as you, but they've been around long enough, they can understand what you're going through. And man, when you can sit there and talk with them and just share what's going on, and they get it, like, you don't have to provide all the backstory, all the caveats, all, there's something freeing about that. And then, yeah, and just being able to connect with people in that way, I think. But that's the thing, is those relationships have to form somewhere.
Yeah.
And they don't form at the conference, right? Because there's too many people. They form leading up to it in different ways. And that's where I'm finding this cohort concept, online, if it has to be because of distance, is actually building some of those relationships early, so that when you're in person, it's just so much more rich.
Michael, I connected with the Northeast Collaborative with Dan. I think when I started leading 95 Network, which was, I began to lead executive director, and I think it was 2018 in July. And it wasn't long before we were connected with Northeast Collaborative. I know you do an annual gathering, I think, in the fall. But what are you guys seeing along those same lines we're talking about?
I think Emily and Jason hit it. Like, yes, we have a conference, but the conference is relational. And I think people, they enjoy some of the content, but they really enjoy, again, we live in a time where pastors and really everyone's kind of isolated. In fact, I think in the Northeast, at least, it's a great opportunity to reach people, because people are isolated in every aspect. Like, they're looking for community.
Yeah.
And if we have pastors connecting into community, it just it makes them healthy. It makes their church healthy. It makes the movement of God in the Northeast and other places healthy. And so, again, I think for NEC, we're a relational network. That's what our opening phrase is. And even in a conference, you can be relational. And even in this kind of environment where we're cohorts or even podcasts, we're relational. Yes, we're sharing some content, but at the end of the day, we're in relationship together. And so I think that relational DNA is so critical to what people need today, that has actually long-standing effects down the road, because I think the content, we forget 90% of the content we receive anyway. So
absolutely.
The people, though, we don't forget. Connection. Absolutely. Like, if we have a problem, we know where to go. And I think those are the big things that we need.
Yeah, I've been, in ministry for, I've been to dozens of conferences, and you get there, and you fill a notebook full of stuff, and you take the church credit card, and you buy all this stuff, and you take the notes and the stuff you bought, and you stick it on the shelf, and you never look at it again when you get back. That's been the norm. And one of the things about conferences that just drive me batty, and you guys can talk about this if you want to or not, but it's just the way the schedules are always just so jam full of stuff. There's no time to breathe. And one of the things I think happens when you have the online connection is there's an opportunity to breathe. You can go to a conference and sit there the whole time and be on the verge of a nervous breakdown, an emotional crash, a divorce, whatever, and no one ever know. But if you're involved in a gathering of, whether it's online or in person, and you have an opportunity, just a moment to let down your guard, you're going to spill the beans. Emily, have you seen anything like that happen as far as some of the groups that you've been part of?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's also when you're connecting, I think sometimes in ministry, it can be hard to share like with your own church people, right? But if you know that it's a safe place with other leaders
You
who
might get
what you're
fired if you
going
do.
through. Right, exactly. Yeah. So being able to have those friends across the country that you can trust, and you know that they're going to be praying for you and they're going to be encouraging you. Yes, I've seen women absolutely open up in these environments.
Jason, you?
Yeah, it's a similar thing. I was a friend of mine up in Maine actually has a ministry that he does where he does cohorts, and they're around a basically a prayer and study kind of thing where you do stuff during the week, and then the 6 to 10 of you get together online and you talk it through and you work through stuff together. And he does multiple ones, and like he's right now they're getting ready, because we're doing this in November, they're getting ready to start an Advent one where you meet. And what happens there is, even if you don't know everyone on the call, by the end of the 6 weeks of actually being vulnerable enough to talk about what you're seeing, what you're learning, all of a sudden there are relationships that form that couldn't have formed otherwise. And it was so cool when Emily and I were leading the handcrafted calling cohort. The great thing about us as a female and a male leading it, because there were male and females in the group, seeing the dynamic happen where we were throwing things at them, questions and reflections and things like that, and watching them process it, and then having just a bigger picture to process it in. Emily could ask some questions that I wouldn't have ever thought to ask, and then I can ask questions that she wouldn't have necessarily thought. So as a team, it actually helped the whole group really relax and begin to process things that, honestly, it's the whole, you don't get breakthrough in the drive-through.
Ooh.
You got to process it. You
Yeah,
got to have
is
time
that
for
original
that.
with you?
I heard it somewhere.
You should have said, I was just thinking.
Yeah.
That is true. Michael, have you had a situation where someone really just this connecting like this really impacted their life that you can think of?
Well, I'll tell you, I think we have a lab that we're doing that I'm really excited about. So I'll just tell you how it's set up. So it's a multiplication lab. So these churches are doing probably campuses. And so we have one of the people bring their greatest problem, and they clarify the problem. Then we go around the circle and everyone asks a clarifying question. And then we go around the circle again, maybe more questions. And then we kind of end with, if you were in their shoes, what would you do? And I think what I love about it is everyone is really going through the same issues. It's
Yes,
not like your
absolutely.
issue is, in fact, you did this on our call too. You just kind of like walked through a couple of the core issues, but I think it is driven by them, like by the people in the room, and they get to hear the problem on their context and then be like, kind of think it through together. I just love the beauty of that problem solving together and taking something very specific and unwinding it, and then kind of sharing some best practices from those in the room. And
Yeah.
It's been a very beautiful time. We've done that probably 3 or 4 times in a row, and I think there's energy in the room. There's so much we can learn from each other that I love that piece.
I've been through so many settings where they're up there and they're doing a phenomenal job answering questions that nobody's asking.
Right.
And so, I mean, thank God they gave the answer to that, but that didn't help me a lick, which is the way we say it down here in the South. It just didn't help. It didn't do anything for me. And I'm like, you come to the table. So like you and I, when we connected and you asked me to be part of that lab, you were like, what topics do you want to cover? And I just asked you for your permission. I just want to ask everybody, hey, tell us what you're doing that's working. And then let's go back around again and tell us what you're doing that's not working. And that's where, and it got so good. In fact, I think we almost ran a little bit long because they were, you always know if what you're doing is working, whether people stay engaged or not. If they're still plugged in, if they're still listening, I had did a couple of webinars with the Center for Congregations in Indiana, and I mean, and I only blocked 45 minutes to be part of that, and one of them went an hour and a half, and not one person dropped off. And so that tells me it's connecting, it's working. And so we want to use the every way we can to help people. And in this case, being able to do a Zoom call. I mean, Michael, you're in New York, Emily's in Pennsylvania, Jason, you're in Ohio, and then I'm in God's country in South Carolina. And we're able to do this call because of technology. And it obviously it's better to get together. Obviously it's better to be in person. But for whatever reason, I don't know why, but we can't. People aren't really wanting to come to in-person things yet. So I'm thinking we're headed down the right road here, I believe. Jason, if someone's listening right now and they're not plugged in at all anywhere, talk to them about the value of why, and even from your own experience of how it can change your life just to get plugged in.
Well, yeah, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but just the idea of having someone that I can call, someone that I am connected to in some way, shape, or form, that understands where I'm coming from, that just changes the dynamic, right? All of a sudden, I don't have to be the expert all the time. I can, when I hit something that maybe I just don't know what to do next, I've got a few people that I can call and say, hey, you may not have the exact answer, but here's what I'm dealing with. Help me process it. We say this in the soul care conference, right? The problem with blind spots is you can't see them. Well, I need someone to help me see the things I can't see. And so this is where those type people that I have in my life, and honestly, a lot of those people, most of those people don't live close enough to me that we can go grab coffee. It's just not realistic. So it is a Zoom call. The pastors that I serve in Converge Mid-Atlantic, I have 4 to 5 Zoom calls a week with a pastor who, maybe is dealing with something. Maybe they just need to hear someone say, you're doing a great job. Like sometimes you just need that. And so having those type connections, and they don't just happen by default. You have to work at them. You have to go find them, because they won't just fall in your lap.
I was watching a short video with Jeff Foxworthy on Instagram, just a reel that he'd posted last week. And Jeff is from Atlanta or in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and he is from the town where Chick-fil-A was founded. So for years as a kid, he went to the only Chick-fil-A in the world, and if you know the Chick-fil-A story, the founder of Chick-fil-A is Truett Cathy. Wonderful man. I just always think about him every time I see when you ride down the interstate and it's got the Chick-fil-A, at the exit with all the restaurants, it's got the Chick-fil-A sign and at the bottom it says closed Sunday, because there's a very specific reason why he did that. And they still honor that. But Jeff was talking to, getting some mentorship from Truett, and Truett asked him. He said, "Jeff," he said, "we're talking along." He says, "Jeff, have you ever had an opportunity when you just really got encouraged by someone?" He said, "Yeah," and Truett was like, "Well, that's the number one thing everybody needs. Everybody needs encouragement. There's not a select group of people. It's discouraged pastors or discouraged leaders or women who are dealing with this. Everybody needs encouragement." And I was thinking about how you ever sit in a sermon where a pastor's preaching and the presence of God is on him, or the anointing, whatever you want to call it, and he'll be preaching about something, or they'll be talking about something, and it has and God's dealing with you about something. It has nothing to do with the context or the message or anything else, because the Spirit of God's working in you. That's what can happen in these particular settings. Just being there and being vulnerable. Have you got any examples of anything like that, Emily, that you've seen where, man, you might have been talking about one thing, but boy, God, he took it, in another trail there, and it really helped somebody?
Probably.
Well, Emily, I mean, I'm not going to speak for you, but just watching you work with the handcrafted calling cohort,
Right.
I've seen you ask those powerful questions
Yeah.
where someone looks at you and says, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that. Right.
Mhm.
And you're asking probing questions into what they
Yes.
just said and why they said it. And I remember, several, and men and women, it wasn't you
Yeah.
because we
Right.
didn't split them up. Right. We just
Yeah.
said, hey, you're all doing,
Yeah.
and you would ask a question, and then when people come into that and they're ready to listen, and then
Yeah.
you are equipped to ask some of those powerful questions that just get them thinking. And I've watched you do that multiple times, in the course of just that one, few
Yeah.
weeks together.
Yeah.
That's where I see it happening,
Yeah.
because
That's
it may
good.
have nothing to do with the topic, but when you ask a question, their brain, you can almost hear the wheels turning,
Right.
over the Zoom call.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
I just the openness to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
to let down your guard. Michael, how do you get guys and then Emily, even ladies,
Yeah.
how do you get people to let down their guard, or do you intentionally do that, or how does that happen? I guess first you, Michael, then Emily, I ask you the same thing.
Yeah. I think because we're primarily doing through Zoom. And so a small thing is like they come into the room, you welcome them, greet them. You just, the conversation. You got to have it can't be dead air while you start, before you
Mhm.
start. I think it's got to be conversational.
Yeah.
I think it's okay for someone to come into a cohort, a Zoom, and say nothing, because you're building safety, you're building trust,
Mm-hmm.
and so in order for them to share some time, they need to feel safe that time. And so, Like it's okay if they don't share, if they don't go deep with a question. But I also want to make sure everyone has a chance to be listened to, because in a Zoom, you have to go around the room differently than you would in person, because people can just kind of like pop in and out. Where
Yep.
in a Zoom call, you have to provide safety where they don't have to speak, but make sure you provide opportunities for them to speak on what they feel comfortable with. And I think over time, that builds comfort with the group. Like I can trust these people, and it's
Yep.
it's the same as in person in a lot of ways. If I trust you,
Yeah.
I can share with you, and if I share with you and you hold it carefully, I will share more with you next time. And so I think you're just building that trust and an environment, even though it's online, of like, hey, we see you, we love you. No matter what you're going through, we want you to win and succeed. And even if you don't, we're for you. Like it's okay. Like God, your identity doesn't change. And so I think creating that environment allows the opportunity for sharing, and then you just wait for them to feel that safety to share.
Mm-hmm.
Emily, can you add anything to that?
Well, in the handcrafted calling, it's a lot of tools that we're using. And so we do hand of God people. Like we will just call out people who've been quiet for a while because we can see their wheels turning on the screen. It's a little different than the kind of group Michael's describing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been interesting when we have called on those people, what comes out of them. And so I think sometimes the introverts, even on Zoom, are still introverted. So that's if you know your people and you have that trust and relationship. Because Jason and I were walking, the first group we did was a group of people from my church, so I knew them. So I could call them out a little bit more than if it had been a brand new group to me. I would have hesitated a little bit more, need to get to know them more. But I wanted to make sure that our introverted people were given the opportunity to speak because our extroverts were very, participatory. They're
Yeah.
ready to go. So sometimes I think we have just called people out, and it's been great to hear what God is stirring in them because we wouldn't have heard it otherwise, especially in a Zoom when you can't always sense. In a room, you can sense maybe more. But it has worked well with those tools in particular, because they know what we're asking, what we're going for. So
I think of all the statistics I've ever heard that Barna has released about church related stuff, he released one like 2 years ago that said upwards of 70% of pastors are introverts.
wow, that's
I,
a lot.
I just thought there's no way that can be true. But as
Wow.
I thought about our ministry and Jason, the people we've come in contact with, I think maybe it is true. And see, obviously I'm not an introvert, so I can't imagine doing this job where where you really don't want to be around anybody. That
Hmm.
would be, I get fed from people. I get fed from a Zoom call. And
Yeah.
some people are like, the greatest thing that ever happened to them was the pandemic, just not having to be around anybody. And
Yes.
so you may be listening right now, and if you're being honest, you would admit, hey, I am an introvert. Well, that doesn't mean you're broken or anything's wrong with you. It's just the way you're put together. And I want to go even a step further. When Promise Keepers came out, back in the day,
Mhm.
one of the things that they tried to get everybody to do was you were all supposed to join up with this small group of guys if you're a guy or ladies if you're ladies and get together once a week, 5 a.m. at a restaurant somewhere and just spill your guts about, all the stuff you're struggling with and things you're watching online. And I'm like, I'm never going to do that. And the
And you're
reason
an extrovert saying that.
I'm never going to do
Yeah.
that, and here's the reason I'm sharing this today. The reason I said that is because I got to know you love me.
Yes.
If I'm going to be honest with you, if I'm going to go there. And in our era, we had so much competition. I talk about this in my book about comparison with each other. There's no way I would be transparent. There's no way. I didn't trust anybody,
Hmm.
you know? And so I think we are at that place as a society today. I don't trust the media. I don't
Right.
trust the politicians. I don't trust a lot of church leaders. And looking around, it's very difficult to find anyone you can trust. But we're not designed to live that way.
Hmm.
Jason, why if someone's listening now, they've never been part of something like this, tell them why they need to be part of it.
Well, I mean, you nailed it there. And in Genesis, it makes it pretty clear. We were created to be in community,
Yeah.
and we need other people around us, and we need to know that we are seen as well as seeing others. And you cannot model what you've never done. And so if you are calling your congregation to be in relationships and to form those kind of bonds with other people, if you've never done it, then you can't show them how, and you really don't have the right to talk about it. And yeah, it's uncomfortable and it's scary to be vulnerable with someone. But like you said, Dale, I want to know before I'm vulnerable, I want to know that you care. And there's going to be stages of that, right? It's not
Absolutely.
first call, I'm going to spill my guts, and that's not going to work, and that's okay. It's not supposed to. But yeah, it's those starting out those steps of intentionally finding some people that you can be real with, trusting them over time, and then learning from them. And maybe that's online, in a group like this, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's in person. It doesn't matter. The point is, do you have those? And there are cohorts out there. There are, online type tools that can connect you to people that maybe you wouldn't have connected to, on your own because you never would have known about them. So, man, take a little risk and step into something.
We began this call talking about the church you were part of. They closed the doors last week, and what you said was they talked about the preachers, but they didn't say anything about discipleship. There's nothing that's been talked about more in the last 2 years than discipleship. Everybody's talking about discipleship. The reason they're talking about it is because it's something we don't do. And I think the reason we don't, if we really want to dive deep into it, I think the reason that we don't do discipleship is because we ourselves aren't disciplers, are getting discipled. There's this mentality that if you're the pastor of a local church, that the buck stops with you. Or if you're in a denomination and there's a hierarchy, you certainly can't tell them what you're struggling with because they'll cut you loose. That's what we weren't transparent in my time because either one, you'd lose your church or your best friend would take your church. I mean, you could not be transparent and honest. And that's limited our ability to build this because as the leader goes, so go the people. That's just a fact. So, Michael, when you think about, as you pastored, you were a youth pastor, you became a lead pastor, and I know you because I was there. Discipleship was huge with you. Was that something you transitioned to, or was it always in your heart to do?
I think again, you learn as you go. Like I was 28 when I planted, and so I didn't have it all figured out. Obviously, at that
Sure.
point, you're starting a church, and so there's so many pieces that you're like, I don't know what I don't know. And then you start looking at a season where you're like, I don't have enough leadership. I'm carrying too much weight myself. I want to reach people, but I don't know what to do with all these people. And so you backtrack. So I need leaders. And then you go backtrack like, well, how do you get leaders? Well, you got to disciple. And then you're like, you got to play the long game. And so you kind of start like, God puts things in your path and you're like, if I'm going to do what God's called me to do, I need to do these sort of things. And then it all goes back to discipleship. And
Yep.
so I would also just, as I was thinking about what you're saying, the DNA of what we're talking about today is true of not just of pastors, but of every person in the church.
Yep.
They need relationship. They need a place to process. If we are obviously scripture is foundational and
Yes.
it's true of the pastor. It's not diminishing content or teaching or preaching. It's raising the level of allowing people to process out loud what they're learning with groups, and it doesn't have to be online, it could be in person, but the same values play out whether it's a pastor or if it's someone who is blue collar, white collar, whatever. It's the same needs. They need to be with someone who they feel safe, they can learn from, going through the same things they're going through. And like, I need to process what it means to be a follower of Christ in this group, just as we do as pastors, leaders. Like, even now in this new position, I don't know what I don't know right now, right? And so who do I learn that from? Who can I process out with this idea of how do I help church planters? How do I help build pipelines with churches? And so it's about having people I can talk this through with along the journey.
Yep. There's this guy in the Bible named Jesus, and he kind of he modeled what you just said. You get the group together and you let them talk it out, and and if they're off base, you guide them back on track and the whole deal. So as we get to the end of the podcast, I want all of you just to address this. I'll start with you, Emily. If someone's listening right now and they've never been vulnerable enough to get plugged in, one of the things we're doing here at 95 Network, our focus this year, we're calling Let's Connect. And all you got to do is just send me an email and say, hey, I want to get together, and we will meet individually. Or if you want to meet together with your staff, We are here. We got a few years experience here with the team at 95 Network, and we don't know everything, but we can surely tell you what we did that worked and what didn't work. Someone's never been involved, Emily. Tell them, in your heart, what's the benefit of them getting connected with something like this?
Well, I've been wrestling a little bit with the idea that therapy has outpaced discipleship. I heard that in a book that I've been reading through, and I know a lot of my friends are in a lot of really great therapy, and I totally support that. But I also know that they pay to do that once a week, and they need people to process that with, and that's discipleship, right? Like what they're learning in therapy, they need to go work through and apply it to their everyday life and have friends that hold them accountable. And I just see the power of cohorts from a lot of friends I have that are in addiction recovery to ministry friends who are in leadership cohorts. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road, and you have friends that can, take you along, carry you along for the journey, and help you grow in ways that you may not expect, but can be really helpful for your overall spiritual, mental, physical, all of it. It can all be impacted by being part of a group that loves you and can help you grow. So,
Jason, why would you encourage someone to do it?
Because I've just seen the benefits. Everything Emily just said, right? Of man, when you are vulnerable and you connect, you become a better person. Like
yeah.
you see parts of you that maybe you've kept hidden, and now you can redeem.
Yeah.
You can see where God is working in those areas. That wouldn't happen if you didn't connect with someone. When we just had our biennial gathering of the Converge Mid-Atlantic churches back in June of 25, and Emily did most of the work to put that together, so she gets all the
You were
credit
my
in that.
partner in crime. Yeah.
But one of the most powerful things we did is we did peer-to-peer groups. Like we
Mhm.
carved out 2.5 hours for people to get together with other people who are in a similar position, whether it's the hospitality team or a lead pastor or a associate, whatever it was. We created 12 different spaces, and I just got so much feedback from people who said, I thought I was alone, but
Mhm.
now I know I'm not.
Yeah.
And so as leaders, part of our job is to create those spaces, right? As pastors, are we, Michael, you alluded to this, are
Mhm.
we creating spaces within our ministries for this to happen? But then as people, we need to make sure we're looking for those spaces, because in those spaces, I can actually relax enough to let the Holy Spirit work in me. And that usually happens in the context of where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name.
Michael?
I would also like, I think the brotherhood, sisterhood, doing mission as a team brings joy. Like I think Satan steals our joy.
Mhm.
Ministry, because of the heaviness, can diminish our joy. But when you're doing it with people, and you're doing it with the right people, there's just a fun. I think we undervalue the kingdom value of play, fun, laughter, and when you can even sense it on the call here,
Yep.
of when you know each other and you're doing ministry together. It's fun, and it's not always easy, but it's good, and those relationships only are formed as you step into one. Maybe it's a cohort, maybe it's a group of pastors in your local community, maybe it's, and then you start building that relationship so that the mission we're on is worth what we're going after. Like we need each other. I need other leaders to push me on, and I can't do it alone. And so, but when I have someone I can like laugh with and play with and enjoy the dance of leadership with, there's just something special about that I
Mhm.
think a lot of pastors are missing, the joy of this, of
Yeah.
just doing life with people.
Good.
That's just so good. I know when I joined the Unstuck group, I was part of that for a couple of years. It was very difficult to leave, to even because I had to leave that to become the executive director at 95 Network, because I didn't want to lose the team.
Mhm.
Because I want to be part of that family, and life's just better when you do it together. Y'all, thanks so much for taking your time to be part of this today. Your input, your wisdom, your experience has been very helpful. If you're listening now and you're like, well, what's the end game of this podcast? It's for you to connect. If you aren't connected with anyone, I am available. I'm sure Jason and Michael, Emily, we would all be here for you. I would love to see you start groups like this within your own local church. Don't call it discipleship, and you'll enjoy it. Okay, since discipleship is the word we're not doing, let's just call it something else. Just but if you are, or if you are alone, or even if you want to just get together, just email me at dale@95network.org. Or if you want to connect with one of these people, everybody's email address will be in the show notes. But start somewhere. You can't just keep doing it alone. And I do believe this will be a springboard to you seeing more effective connection within your own local church. Guys, thanks again for being here. This has been great. It's a great way to start the year, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the 95 Podcast. We look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. In the meantime, visit our website at 95network.org. The website is loaded with great resources created for small and mid-sized church leaders. Until next time, have a great week.